I'm going to tell you about a few traits that I believe people, entrepreneurs, startup, business education, we all must inculcate in order to really be successful, either as entrepreneurs or startups or whatever else we do. The first point for me is pivot, pivot, pivot. When you come up with an idea, that idea cannot be a fixed idea, it cannot be in stone. You have to constantly change the idea to make it suitable for what the particular situation demands. Has anybody heard about Best Buy? It's a US brand, Best Buy. Yeah? It's just like the Chroma and the Reliance Digitals of India. So Best Buy faced a unique problem when Amazon.com was launched, that people would come into the store, touch the TVs, touch all the electronic goods, and then open Amazon on their phone and buy it on their phone. And Best Buy reached a point of bankruptcy because they had no more business. Amazon had taken all the business. So at that point, they had to pivot their business model. What do you think Best Buy did? Did they file for bankruptcy or did they pivot the business model? Well, they didn't file for bankruptcy because they're still in existence today. So what Best Buy essentially did was, they said, well, the customers are not paying us. Someone has to. Maybe the suppliers will pay us. Let's tell Samsung, Sony, Apple, let's tell all of them that if you want to keep your products in my store, you pay me. Because the customers are not. So a few of them said, no, why should we pay you? It's a bizarre concept that the supplier should pay you to keep our own goods in the store. And they didn't, and their sales dipped because when customers came to Best Buy, they couldn't find the products to touch and feel, so they didn't buy it on Amazon. In essence, Best Buy became a showroom for these products, and they started charging for that. And by pivoting the idea, they're still in existence today. The second, I think, is really important to get partners. Take people who come your way. Don't judge people just by the way they look or seem or what they're saying. Evaluate each possibility as a potential partnership. A quick story here, there was this little boy, 10 years old, entered this cafe, shabbily dressed, and the waiter's like, what do you want? Because you're occupying a table, there are people waiting here. The boy says, I want this dish of ice cream. And he says, how much is this for? And the man says, it's 30 rupees. And the boy starts counting the coins from his pocket and says, no, what else do you have? And he says, well, we have this little, much smaller scoop of ice cream for 25 rupees. And the boy's like, looks at the coins again and says, okay, let's order that. And he quickly ate it, went to the cashier, paid and left. And the waiter went back to the table to collect the payment. And he couldn't swallow when he saw that the boy had paid the entire amount at the cashier, but had left 5 extra rupees tip for the waiter. So he couldn't fathom that instead of ordering what he wanted, this boy was actually trying to be a good person and even help the old waiter who was serving him. So partnerships, don't judge people, right? That's really something that we should all really deeply think about. The third is that be disruptive in your thinking. Today I don't need to go talk about Uber and Airbnb and all the companies and your Bitcoin, a bank without cash. I don't have to talk about disruptive ideas because that's how you have to think. What's disruptive? Just believe in yourself. Just believe in yourself. This man was 65 years old, was living on $99 social security checks, had no money left, decided that I make excellent chicken, let me go and sell my recipe to different restaurants. He goes there, nobody wants to take his recipe. He didn't ask for money, he said, give me a percentage of your profits. Nobody agreed. 1,009 times he failed. 1,009. The 1,010th time, someone said, fine, we'll do it. It was such a success. Today that man's brand is called Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC. Right? Always believe in yourself. The last point would be, don't be afraid of failure. Failure is not the enemy. Fear of failure drives you to success. Right? A samurai sword is beaten and beaten and beaten, then put in fire, beaten, taken out, and you see the final product, what a beautiful sword that is. And that's how you will succeed. Right? So for me, what's missing is these 5 things. This is what we should really have in our education, in our talks, and how to motivate other entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Karan. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samir. And so, I think there are 2 things I really want to talk about here. One would be the how. So when we talk about the future of education, and I think specifically earlier we were referring to technology in education. And I do think that technology is the future in education. And one of the things I do is I work with IE Business School, a school in Madrid. And they've come up with this concept called the WOW room. The WOW room is a room which has 120 screens, all stacked up against each other. And on each screen could be a student from some part of the world who streams in. And you have the professor in the center of the room. And the professor is teaching these 120 students from different parts of the world. Through facial recognition software, the professor can see if the student is bored, if the student is paying attention, if they're happy, if they're sad. Every emotion can be measured. And he can tweak his lesson to suit what the students really want. And for me, that was the future. That was, wow. Till they took it to the next step, and they said, well, the professor can't travel to Madrid. He's in South America right now. All right, so let's use virtual reality and put him standing in the room when he's not actually there, but the students think he's there. And they took it one step further. Think of the potential of a concept like this. Take it to all the rural areas in India, all the areas which now are getting connected through internet, the areas which have interconnectivity, but we can now reach them. We can actually reach these remote areas, give them high quality education through technology. Virtual reality, augmented reality, 3D printing. Our students are printing things what we could imagine, what you think in your head is now in front of you. For me, this is the future. That you start using technology, let's change the lives around us. So much change can come in. And we are moving in the right direction. I think we are. When we go to, one of the other things I do is I'm a social activist as well. And I visit and I teach in several schools in Dharavi and several other areas of the state. And when I meet the children there, they are so technologically advanced. It's not the vision you would have in your mind that they're not exposed to technology. They're exposed to technology all the time. And I think this is what we really need to do. We need to see how do we use this technology to their benefit. I was at this session a few weeks ago where we had a psychiatrist and we had several other people who were talking about how technology is killing our children and how our children are just spending time on their iPad and how they're just on their phones all the time. And the questions were like, how do we control that? I do understand that there's a balance and you can't be on technology all the time. But at the same time, can we really control technology? Are we trying to think of a world which doesn't exist anymore? We've moved on. People were talking about how lonely it gets when you immerse yourself in technology. Well, they haven't spoken to Siri and Alexa yet, but it's not that lonely. You have several people that you can interconnect with through technology as well. So I think for me, the future of education definitely would move with technology. But yes, the second point. So the second point with education, and specifically related to entrepreneurship and this startup summit that we are in right now, the question is, can entrepreneurship be taught? In education, when you talk about the future of education, can entrepreneurship be taught? And we toyed with this question for a long time. There were several people who said no and several people who said yes. And today, as a representative of a business school and a person who has studied business as well, I can say yes, you can teach someone an entrepreneurial mindset. You can teach someone how to identify the next big entrepreneurial opportunity. That can be taught. How, you may ask? It can be taught through motivation. Teach people what motivation is. Teach them how to motivate others. Teach them to identify motivation. In addition to that, teach them humanities. Teach them psychology. Teach them the important traits of a successful entrepreneur. Back in the late 1800s, they said medicine cannot be taught. Medicine has to be learned on the trade. Doctors cannot be given medical education. Think how dangerous that thought was, which was accepted for the longest time. We need to make sure that that same thought does not creep into entrepreneurship and startups. It can be taught in different ways. I'm not saying teach by just teaching concepts. I'm talking about actually doing. At IE, you have Area 31, which is a venture lab, an incubator, if you can imagine that, where we encourage students to come in with business plans, bring venture capitalists, bring them in front and present those plans. So yes, that's my second point, that entrepreneurship can be taught.